We are right now beyond the Arctic Circle in the Lofoten Islands of northern Norway. Lofoten Islands is an archipelago, a series of islands perched right next to the Norwegian Sea. But we spent the last 3 days there, and our journey in Lofoten Islands comes to an end today. But we are driving up to the Arctic capital of northern Norway, Tromso. This drive is going to last over 6 hours, and we are going to explore the beautiful scenery this place has to offer, look into the history, learn about the past of this location. So come join me on this journey as we drive from Lofoten Islands to Tromso in northern Norway. Our morning begins in the town of Svalbard in Lofoten Islands. We stayed at a Rådbu hotel. And this is the view from our window, which is absolutely spectacular. The name of the hotel is Sovenia. So if you are ever in this area, feel free to check it out. This hotel is pretty historic. Some of the houses over here are more than 150 years old. And actually the cabin which we stayed at is more than 100 years old itself. These red houses what you saw is called a Rådbu. These are very traditional fishing villages of northern Norway, and the red color, this is a very distinctive color and a very distinctive feature which you will see in this part of the world. This red color comes from the blood of the fish and the animals they were slaughtered here, and they would mix that with cod oil. Cod fish was very abundant, so cod oil and combined will create this red color. So this is one of the most distinguishing features of the architecture of northern Norway. The hotel was situated in a small island, so we crossed the bridge and we are now in the main city of Svalbard. You will also see some houses are yellow in color, so they almost had this three-tiered of house colors. They had the red houses, which are the Rådbuers. Then you have some of the yellow houses, followed by the white houses. White houses meant the most wealth. The road we are driving on is called the E10. This is an European route, a very well paved, a nicely built road. This starts its journey all the way in the south of the Lofoten Islands in a small fishing village called Å. And then this traverses the whole length of the Lofoten Islands, and finally it goes all the way up to Sweden to a town called Luia. Now, we are going to drive on this road for a good few hours, and then we are going to transition to other e-roads on this highway system. Driving is fairly easy on this road, other than sometimes we find some local drivers who just go too fast around the corners, so you have to be a little bit careful, especially if mountain driving is not something you are super comfortable with. Let's talk about the drive itself and why we chose to drive. Now, is that the only option to go from Lofoten to Tromso? The answer is no. There are at least 4 different ways to go. You can fly. There are a couple of airports like the Narvik airport, which we actually flew into. Or there's a Bodo airport. You can take a flight out of either of those two and fly into Tromso. That's option 1. You can take a bus. You have to change the bus though. You can take a ferry, so you can go to this town called Harstad and you can take a ferry up from there to Tromso. Or as we are doing, you can take a drive. Now, the other 3 options, we looked into it very carefully and then we discarded because those were proving to be either inconvenient, the timing of the ferries, for example, were pretty off, or those were like very expensive. We are a family of 4, so you have to buy 4 tickets. So buying on a flight or a ferry was not cheap at all. Now the card has one major disadvantage, that they charge a one-way trip fee, which is around $300 to go from pick up the car in Narvik and then drop it off at Tromso. But even paying the $300 penalty, it's cheaper to drive up rather than paying for the flight or the ferry or the bus. So We are finally at this bridge, which is called the Tujesland Bridge or the Tujesland Broa, if I'm pronouncing that right. This is kind of where the island of or the archipelago of Lofoten comes and meets the mainland. So we cross the bridge over, and now we are at the mainland, and we are driving further north. Now, if you are planning this particular drive, there are few different routes for you. We are taking the most efficient route, which is purely on this E series of highways, uh, and this is like very well maintained, very nicely paved, and things like that. It's still going to be more than 430 kilometers or around 300 miles of drive, and it's going to take over 6 hours. And now, you include in some stoppage times and all, it's going to be easily over 7 hours of drive. But we initially thought we'll take a little bit different route. This route goes a little bit further north. You have to drive to this place called Andenes, and then from there you have to get onto a car ferry. Again, like pretty unique, which crosses the entrance to this particular strait on the Norwegian Sea, and then we arrive at the island of Senja. Now, this was something we definitely wanted to try out. Senja was our list of things to do, and once we go there, you will find this thing called Bargus Bottom Utsaka platform. Sorry, I'm not going to try to pronounce. That's a huge viewing platform in front of a fjord, so it gives a spectacular viewpoint of the fjord. Then there's another place called Tungeneset. There are a couple of other beautiful beaches over there. So that was definitely something we wanted to try, but it was probably a little bit too risky for us with young kids, given we had to time with the ferry perfectly, and the road goes via a lot of backcountry roads, smaller roads. The E10 is a more efficient, more faster option. Now, this is akin to driving on a highway on an interstate like in the US, but this is a spectacular interstate, so we were okay to trade off. But if you're able to take the other road, the distance is going to be a little bit shorter, around 300 kilometers or so. You are going to take a little bit longer depending on what time you leave and what time you get the ferry and things like that. But I have heard from others that that's probably an even more spectacular drive than this one. By the way, this is early May, and you see that completely frozen lakes. And this scenery is a little bit insane to us, like we have never seen this kind of frozen lakes in early May. Now we are entering an area with a little bit of sobering history. Battle of Narvik was the biggest war which Norway had to fight in 1940s, and that was fought right around this area. And along this highway we are going to see a whole bunch of monuments which respects and honors and tells the story of Battle of Narvik and the story of human perseverance. So in early 1939-1940s, the German forces occupied Narvik because they wanted to secure the Narvik port for shipment of iron ore which are produced in nearby Sweden. This ensured the biggest battle this town has ever seen, and after almost 60 days of siege, the Allied forces finally won. But eventually, because of the cold and the harsh winters, the Allied forces are forced to move out, and the German soldiers bombarded the city and almost destroyed the whole thing, and they finally reoccupied the city, and it was under German occupation till 1945. So we actually now enter the town of Narvik. So this is the focal point. This was the focal point of the whole invasion back in 1940s. Now, I have been fascinated with Narvik for as long as I can remember. I have always wanted to come here. And that's because this is the northernmost point in Norway you can ride on a train to. So as you come this far north, the terrain becomes a lot more difficult. There's a lot more mountains and fjords. So there is no train line. The only train line which comes here is via Sweden. And there is a very famous train here called the Arctic train, which actually lives from Stockholm. It comes to this town called Kiruna in Sweden, and then you can take this line called the Lofoten line to come to Narvik. Now, I'm a little bit of a train enthusiast, so I was just so delighted to come here, though we had to miss out on riding that beautiful train. So Narvik is located on the shores of a fjord called the Ofotfjorden. And it's on that fjord is where you have the port or the harbor of Narvik, which was the main reason of all the conflict back in the World War II days. If history fascinates you, especially World War II history, there is a war museum in Narvik. There are also a whole bunch of other places nearby. There are bunkers which you can visit, old fortresses which played a key part in the whole battle. We are also going to see some of the other monuments and key sites even on this drive. So, if World War II is your thing, if history is your thing, this place is an absolute fascinating place to visit. Now, if history is not your thing and you have kids, or maybe you are a zoologist, I don't know, anyone who likes an animal, there is something called a polar park. It is around 45-50 minutes drive north of Narvik. So you can head out right there. This is supposed to be the northernmost animal park in the world, or another word for zoo. And this is where you are going to find a lot of Arctic animals like elk and Arctic foxes and bears. So if you want to go up close and personal with some of the Arctic animals, this is a must visit place for you. We definitely wanted to go there. We reached there, but we are a little bit too late. The park closed at like 3:30, so we could not unfortunately visit the park. So one interesting thing is we are pretty far up north, and as you can see, it feels very cold and there is a lot of snow. But one of the main reasons for the conflict, and by the way, this is one of those monuments of the World War II. Now, one of the main reasons for the conflict was the port of Narvik. Now, where there are no other ports around here, so what's the speciality of this? The most interesting factor over here is that this port is an ice-free port. The other ports of Sweden and all nearby, they used to have ice all year round, so you cannot ship iron ores throughout the year, only for a few months around the year. But in Narvik, as well as we'll see in Tromso, the very warm Gulf Stream flows in this part of the seas, and that makes it a lot more warmer. And so this particular port, the Narvik port, is actually ice-free all year round, which makes it particularly lucrative for shipping out iron ores which are mined in Sweden. Believe it or not, with all the snow which we see everywhere with the frozen lakes and everything like that, this is actually a lot warmer compared to every other place on Earth which is situated at this latitude. This goes to only like minus 14 or minus 15 degrees Celsius here in the winter, whereas in the neighborhood Finland, it can go to minus 50 at the same latitude. And that's because of the Gulf Stream. A guide later told us in Tromso that that's why this area is known as, believe it or not, the Bahamas of the North. So you can see, I talked about roadways early on. As you can see, it is like everywhere strewn on the countryside. So all those red houses which you see, those are the roadways. They are kind of always perched right on the water, so they are kind of standing 1 feet in the water. And the way it was designed so that the fishermen, they could bring their fish, they could bring their catch of the day right below the houses, and they can store all the fish up in the house without ever leaving the confinement and the comfort of the house. And today, many of them are converted to this hotel. So if you are ever in this part of the world, I would highly, highly, highly recommend staying at a Roadbu hotel near you. Now, as you can see, the landscape has changed quite a bit. As we sort of start going further north, we are a lot more inland compared to when we are in Lofoten Islands. So there is, you can see a little bit of the bay and a strait, some lakes and so on and so forth. But we are not as close to the sea, and actually pretty big patches of the land for over hundreds of kilometers we have driven through, which is just mountains and open land on all sides. So we started off from E10, then we went to E6, then we went to the E8 highway. And right now, this water which you see, this is the very end of the Tromso Strait, which comes right from the Norwegian Sea. There's a long, narrow fjordish water. I don't really understand the difference between like a strait at some place and fjord. They seem to use these words interchangeably. But we are entering the general area of Tromso. The people who have lived here, obviously are the Vikings, but also the main indigenous people who lived here for thousands of years, are of the tribe called Sami. Today, you are going to find a lot of villages, Sami villages and Sami museums around Tromso. But we visited in May when some of the museums and the villages were closed, so we could not really get a very first-hand feeling of it. If you are really want to explore the Sami way of life, you have to come here before April. One of the main livelihood of the Sami people is rearing reindeers, and they have reindeers only during the winter. And what we learned is in come April or so, end of April, they actually leave the reindeer out in the wild so that the reindeers can just take care of themselves during the warmer summer months. We actually met a few of those reindeers, so that was pretty fascinating, especially for my kids. Like, we are driving by and there are like a couple of reindeers just hanging out right in the middle of the road. So we are gradually seeing the town of Tromso emerging in front of our eyes. So that mountain, what you see, and you will see that it has all those small, small houses, that is the town of Tromso. Tromso is an island. It is the island of Tromsoya. And we are right now in a neighborhood outside of Tromso, which we'll drive through, and then we are going to get on that island of Tromsoya, where the town of Tromso is. So Tromso is almost at 69 degrees latitude. This is actually the world's largest town this far north, anywhere outside of Russia. And including Russia, this is the third largest town at this far up in the north. Back in 2008, the Norwegian Olympic Committee had actually proposed Tromso to host the Winter Olympics. And they had plans to put the whole media village out on ships right on that water body. That would have been quite an insane setting for a Winter Olympics. That would have, if that would have happened, that would have the first time ever any Olympics event have happened north of the Arctic Circle. But unfortunately, the cost issues eventually led the Norwegian Olympic Committee to withdraw its bid. But today it is home to Tromso IL, a football club or a soccer club, and that is the northernmost Premier League club anywhere in the world. Now, Tromso is obviously one of the best places to see the northern lights, but we are coming in early May, so that's not gonna happen. There is well documented history of Tromso, of indigenous peoples of the Sami culture and the Norse culture living here from back in 700-800 AD. So over 1,000-1,200 years old. But it became a city by a charter of the king back in 1794, and it gradually, very quickly actually, rose in prominence as a center of Arctic hunting. There was a college established by 1820s. This became a frontier town. This became one of the most important northerly towns of Norway, especially for Arctic hunting and trading, as a harbor. And again, the warm Gulf Stream plays a huge role here, being it a relatively lot more warmer climate than any other part of nearby like Finland and Sweden. Now, here is something interesting we heard at the hotel. Apparently, back in early 1900s, Tromso got to be known as a Paris of the North. Now, the origin of that nomenclature is quite uncertain, but it apparently because people expected like barbarians living like this cold and this far north, and rather they found people to be very sophisticated like a Parisian, and that's how this town became known as the Paris of the North. So we already have Bahamas of the North and Paris of the North. So this town has everything going for itself. Now we are coming across a very interesting structure. This is called the Arctic Cathedral. This was built in 1960s, and today this is a huge monument and a landmark for not only Tromso but of northern Norway. We are going to come visit this later. This is definitely one of the things you will come to if you are in Tromso. The water body which we have been driving next to is called the Tromso Strait. There is this narrow bridge which we are going to cross over. It is called the Tromsoya bridge or Tromso Brua. Brua is the name for a bridge, and we are going to cross this bridge over and we're going to head into Tromso. The Norwegian Sea is actually not too far. It is right behind the mountains which we see on the right hand side somewhere. So it is only a few miles. I think it is not more than like 10 miles or so, or 15 kilometers or so from here. So now finally we can see the city of Tromso sort of emerge right in front of us, and my first impression that this looks like a pretty big congested city. It sort of goes up in the mountain. It has this sort of gray feel everywhere, but definitely very interesting looking, and I'm super excited that we are here. We are going to spend 3 days in Tromso, and we have a whole lot of things planned. We are obviously going to explore the city, walk around on the foot. We're going to try to still see the Sami village. I don't know whether those are still operational. Most of the online places said they are not, but you know, we are here. We are going to give it a shot. We have an Arctic fjord cruise booked. We are really looking forward to that. So we talked about fjords a little earlier, like in Narvik there is a fjord. There are these long narrow bodies of water which you find all over in Norway, and there are a couple of very special fjords this far north, which are the Arctic fjords. They get frozen over during the winter, which is a very unique phenomenon as far as it concerns with fjords. So we are going to check that out, and then after a few days here we are going to go further south to Bergen. So this is gonna be absolutely amazing. We are gonna stay at Moxie, which is of the Marriott property. They have it right next to the airport on the other side of the island than where we are. I think we have to go by a tunnel to reach the other side. But looking forward to this next 3 days. It's gonna be epic.